Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic interview show. It's episode 571. We got a great guest. We got Paul Lacey with us. Paul is an active web developer, has been agency owner. We're going to be talking about all things agency, freelancing, how to keep your mental health to the up and ticker, as they would say down under, and all things WordPress. So, Paul, would you like to give us a quick 20-second intro about yourself?
I'll try.
20 seconds.
Okay, I've already lost 5 already. So I was co-founder of an agency called the Dicky Bird Studio, which I'm currently closing down. So we'll probably talk about that a little bit today. Prior to that, I've been working in WordPress, either as a freelancer or an agency owner for the last 15 years or so, self-employed. More recently, I've gone back to freelancing. I do some freelancing for Beaver Builder and a bunch of other clients as well, and do some care plans and stuff like that. And then similar to the WP-Tonic panel show that you do every week, I'm the co-host of one of your enemy shows, This Week in WordPress, which is me and Nathan Wrigley. We do a kind of weekly panel show. So we're friends, really, aren't we?
What did Picasso say? You know, copying. I forgot what he said actually. Picasso.
Is it like the greatest form of,
flattery
or something?
Yeah.
Stephen, I've got my great co-host with me. Stephen, would you like to quickly introduce yourself to the new listeners?
Yeah, my name's Stephen Sauter. I'm from zipfish.io, where we make WordPress fast by optimizing servers and the code that runs on them.
Before we go into the main part of the interview, I just want to mention our major sponsor, that is Kinsta Hosting. Kinsta is a WordPress hosting provider only. It specializes in the hosting of large websites like WooCommerce, Lifter LMS, LearnDash, or any kind of large membership site. They offer great technology, Google Cloud, all the latest versions of PHP, great support. So if you're looking for a great hosting partner for yourself or for clients, I suggest that you go over to Kinsta, buy one of their packages. And if you do that, and I strongly advise you to do that, go and tell them that you heard about them on the WP-Tonic website. It helps Kinsta and it helps support the show. So, Paul, like I say, you're greatly experienced in the WordPress community and using WordPress, and like you're closing down your agency. That's all. The ending of something and the beginning of something new is always painful. I just want to discuss quickly with you what are some of the main differences between being a successful freelancer and being an agency owner. So maybe you, on reflection, can you point out like 2 to 3 major differences in the roles, really?
Mm-hmm. Well, I've been a freelancer twice, and then in between those times, I've been an agency owner twice as well. And I've been really good at one of those things and quite bad at the other one, and the one that I wasn't very good at was the agency owner. But in terms of like, if we're sort of looking at a definition, like my own definition of the difference between the two, there's kind of the stock definition of, let's say, a freelancer first, which is someone who's kind of working in the sort of gig economy where they've got a bit of a feast or famine sort of workflow. They're working with this client, they come in, they do a job. That job could be just a few hours or it could be a couple of weeks. But they do that job and then they come back out of that relationship until that client or partner needs that person again. And a freelancer is generally classed as an independent individual. And sometimes that person will bring in some of their associates, but they don't typically, by the definition, hire people. An agency, on the other hand, is, and I do think a lot of these things are misexplained or misdefined sometimes, but an agency, on the other hand, is typically seen as something where there's a bit more of a 360-degree service offering usually. So you might have a freelancer might do Facebook ads, whereas an agency is more likely to be doing a marketing strategy, which includes Facebook ads, and they might hire that freelancer, for instance. Also, generally, it's kind of expected that an agency has employed team members who are more permanent than freelancers. Again, it's not always the case. And an agency is often seen as a business that is intended to grow. So it starts out, it has a period of investment where it needs to build up clients and all that sort of stuff. And the general idea is that people always talk about is scaling it. On the flip side, you've got your freelancers, where the general criticism of the idea of freelancing is that there's like a ceiling that you can reach. And when you reach that ceiling, you're out of hours to work. So you need to turn into an agency. And those are the definitions that I kind of run by. But I actually disagree with those definitions as well to a certain extent. And because they're a little bit too rigid, I think. And there's some misconceptions, I think, in there as well. I don't know if we want to get into those, but yeah.
I just got a quick follow-through question before I throw it over to Stephen. Is that, you said you've been an agency owner twice and the rest of the time being a freelancer. So looking back, I think Dicky Bird is your last agency. What would you say was one of the major problems that you faced with that agency that led to your decision to close it down?
I think here's the thing. So when you're a successful freelancer, which a lot of us get to, you get to this virtual glass ceiling where you're supposed to not be able to earn any more money or something. And you will have a lot of friends potentially that are also freelancers or agency owners, and they will always have that in the same way that when you go to like a family get together, and if you're not married but you're with a partner for a long time, they'll start saying, when are you getting married? And then when you get married, they're like, when are you having kids? Or if you've got kids, they're like, when are you getting married? That's wrong, or something. But you can have a lot of these conversations with your peers, and they'll be like, oh, you're a freelancer, there's a ceiling to that, you should really start an agency. And there's not many people that you meet that will say the opposite, like, oh, do you know what, you're a freelancer, maybe you should look at some alternative streams of income to complement your freelance work and start, mixing things up. And the reason I sort of preface that with your question was that for me, I was a successful freelancer, and I'm a creative and a developer. And I felt that the right thing to do was starting an agency, but I was completely the wrong kind of personality. I'm a creative, I'm a doer, I'm a technician as such. And going into a situation where to earn the same money, you've almost got to earn 5 times the same money if you're employing a couple of people in the agency. To take on that stress that you don't realize, you often jump into these situations with lots of optimism, blind optimism, which is good. But it's good to listen to a few people sometimes who've been there and can give you a couple of the warnings and the things to watch out for as well. So in terms of like what went wrong, I think a good creative or developer isn't always a good fit to be a good CEO. And I think that's where it went wrong for me. Yeah. The company didn't completely fail, but me personally, I was just burning out. I was just burning out and constantly looking for, little signs that maybe things were okay and stuff like that. But I think I heard something the other day. The only thing that a rundown CEO can do is run down his own company or her company or whatever. But that's where it came to. I think in the end, I just got to a point. Watched a Disney film at Christmas called Soul, I think it was called. Watched that film with my family, just sitting there normally. At the end of the film, it's one of those kind of films that's about what you should be doing in life and that kind of thing. And I was just burst out in tears in front of my 6-year-old and 13-year-old. And they're probably wondering, what the hell's wrong with Dad? It was a bit sad at the end, and I'd had lots of this kind of bursting out crying moments in the
I have them regularly, especially with some of my clients. Yeah, they may I'm starting to be flippant there, but it's true. Right.
That's
Thanks.
it. I think over time you start to. I think the crying aspect. I've put it on my Twitter profile. I'm a crybaby because I was for the last year. But the kind of the outward emotion is helpful because you start to realize there's something wrong, and when you're holding it all in, but eventually it gets to a point where you just have to really have a good conversation with yourself and watch a good Disney film, and you'll be all right.
Yeah, there you go. Over to you, Stephen.
Man, like just like hearing what you're saying like resonates with me a lot. That like once that there's a lot, I think, like of society that pressures you to keep building bigger and like keep going for more. And there's nobody that's saying, hey, maybe if you just like go for a little bit less, your life will actually be a lot more valuable or a lot more, right? Like you have more free time, you have more control over what happens. And when you get into like that agency like flywheel or bandwagon or whatever, like you can't stop because you have other people that you're trying to pay and you got to like press harder and harder and harder and harder. And it just feels like it gets like bigger and bigger as time goes on. Do you think there's a point where it becomes easier though? Like where if you can figure out the path through the agency route, like that the agency life becomes easier? Or do you think it's always like running an agency because it involves more people? You can't just say, okay, you know what? I need to pause for the next week and take, a week vacation with my family or whatever. Because there's, 10 people or however big your agency is depending on you.
For the right person, it's the right job. It's the right thing to do. Let's say you worked in digital marketing or something like that for the last 10 years in maybe corporate sales in another agency or something like that. You never tried to do the design. You never tried to do development. Your job was to build great relationships with clients, to pull in sales, and to work with your team. Let's say you worked in that kind of company. You got made redundant from your job. You got a $40,000 payout or something like that, and you're wondering what to do. You've already got the right mindset about this is what I do. I create the relationships and keep the sales coming in. I now need to use my $40,000 to either go on holiday and get another job, or I can invest it in a team or some associates and try and actually build an agency. And that person knows from the get-go what it is that they're trying to achieve. And I think that creatives and developers, not everybody, but a lot of us will come from an angle of, okay, I need to earn a bit more money and I want to have more impact on the work that I do. And it's not a good bet to jump into the CEO role of an agency and think that that's the most likely outcome. It might be. And like I say, the person who comes out of corporate sales and has got the right mindset for it will probably have a situation in maybe 6 years, because it takes 5 to 6 years to build a really good business like that, where they're building out awesome work, but the gamble is definitely not in their favor. There's a lot of agencies that don't achieve great work. They achieve a lot of mundane work and they keep the bills paying, they keep the lights on. Maybe the CEO can go on holiday or something, and there's some people looking after stuff. But you also hear a lot of CEOs who go on holiday after 6 years of running a business, and they still can't go on holiday, and the whole thing doesn't fall apart when they've arrived home. So I think there is a way through it. There's lots and lots of advice out there on how to do it. There's all sorts of courses and blueprints and stuff like that. But you've got to match the skills and the situation with the right person. And my learning point from all of this is, you can think for yourself. You can think for yourself and think, well, what do I actually want to do? And then have conversations with people around you and think for yourself. And weigh up all the different options and think, what is the best route for me? Is it a job, freelance, or agency? So yeah, I think there is a way to do it. I just was never personally able to get the right mix because it wasn't the right thing for me as such.
Do you think that, or it sounds like you're saying that is a problem that mainly plagues the producers of the work, right? Like the designers or the developers. But if you start from I can't do the work sort of thing, like, oh, I'm just a relationship kind of guy, like the relationships are the work that you're doing, right? And the selling and the client management and account executive or however or whatever is going on. That is primarily a issue that plagues the work doers or work creators?
I think it is an issue for those people. We were talking earlier about a book called The E-Myth Revisited, which I read and spoke about on some podcasts a couple of years ago. And I think I misinterpreted I think I misinterpreted what the book was telling me to a certain extent. But that's books and advice where you can look at it from different angles. I think it is the case that what this book kind of talks about is this story about this baker who is really good at her baking, has a small kind of artisan business, just herself, baking cakes for a certain amount of people, and she wants to scale it up. And what she really struggles with is that everything that is successful about her business is her and her skills. So she didn't realize that she'd built up a really positive personal brand, and that it was not that she could sell more cakes, it was that people wanted the cakes made by her. So when she starts a business, she has to get to work getting a premises, getting all the equipment, hiring some team to do some of the baking and stuff like that. And what she finds is she's no longer making the cakes, and all the customers don't think that they taste as good anymore. And so she's losing customers, and she's managing people, and she's working till 4 a.m. She's getting up at 4 a.m. in the morning to turn the baking machines on and all that sort of stuff. And she's finishing at 10 p.m. at night and that kind of thing. And I don't know if it's a true story or not. The book kind of says it as it is, but it just kind of shows that those doers, the artisans, the designers, the creative, it's very, very difficult if you love the work that you do to detach yourself from it and say, okay, for the next 5 years, I'm going to think in a completely different way. I'm not worried about my quality of work. I'm going to build it back up so that in 5 years' time, my reputation, but as an agency this time, is all really good. So they get involved in everything. So they hire the staff. They're trying to run the bakery. They're trying to make the cakes at the same time. They burn out. The customers aren't happy. The staff leave because they've just got a grumpy CEO all the time, and it doesn't really work out for them. So I think it is a bit of a curse of the creatives and the writers and the artisans. I believe anyway.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Sorry, go ahead, John.
I think it's time for us to go for our break. We'll be back in a few moments with this great discussion. We'll be back soon.
Cool. Are we still live?
Yeah. We're coming back. We've had a great discussion with Paul so far. I thought that was a great example, Paul, but I think you said some real words of wisdom in the first half of the show there. I think, and definitely, I think there's a lot of ways to reduce the risk here, and it's based on my own bitter experience about how I run WP-Tonic, and maybe we can go into that in this half, or probably leave it to the bonus content that people can watch on the YouTube channel. But what I think one of the main key points is, which a lot of creators struggle, is when you've got an agency, you really got to focus on relationships and sales and marketing materials that can position the agency or the business and put you in front of your target audience. And you've got to really understand who your target audience is, which is a totally other subject. And I think a lot of people that are very good at coding or very good at graphic design or whatever their superpower is, they really struggle with that, Paul, because it's like they're giving up the reason why they got involved in the industry in the first place, and they're just doing something which they don't really want to do.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's other ways. If you're a freelancer, the positive things that I've realized about being a freelancer is that there is another path to going, okay, the only way I move forward from here is to do something I don't want to do for 5 years and risk messing it all up. And I think this is the thing about all three of us here are on on a podcast, and we're involved in many different things like that. And I know that all three of us know the benefits that this brings. And it's, to a certain extent, it's around personal branding. And I know that that can be kind of, some people don't like to say that word, you know, if they're kind of, you know, blue collar working class or something like that. No, I don't want to talk about personal branding. No. But at the end of the day, we do have to remember that we are experts in what we do when we get to a certain point in freelancers, and we shouldn't be shy about becoming a bit of a voice from time to time in different communities where we can build a better reputation. And the thing I've noticed as a freelancer as well is that the more personal branding type stuff that you do, the more you become a voice. First of all, you enjoy it because it's fun and you get to meet other people. But secondly, all sorts of doors open all of the time. You know, I had a really good job offer. I didn't take it. I had a really good job offer just last week. A phone call with one of the top guys in one of the most famous WordPress companies. You know, heard that I was going freelance again, and obviously, if I was not known in the WordPress world at all, then this person's not going to call me and offer me this opportunity. And that's as a result of being a voice. You know, I've got no product to sell. I'm never going on, you know, things and selling my services. I haven't even got a website at the moment. I'm in that in between stage at the moment. So
I just don't know. I just don't know how you can live with yourself. Well,
yeah, I don't know how to make websites. I don't know. I'm going to try and learn or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think with being a freelancer, right? It's not true that you hit a ceiling. These days, in the world that we live in WordPress, there's a lot of opportunities for monthly recurring or annually recurring income. There is a ton of opportunities for that. Right now, 50% of my income at least comes from care plans, and another 25% of that income comes from my retainer working with the guys over at Beaver Builder. And that's before I do any project work at all. So the project work, you know, is almost like a bonus on top of that. So you can get yourself into a situation where you go, okay, I'm in the gig economy for a while, but I'm going to look for a good partnership with someone in the industry, whether that's like a WordPress brand, and have a part-time retainer situation with those. See if I can get some recurring income through things like care plans, website care plans, and maintenance and stuff like that. And do you know what? If I'm going to go and be a voice for a while, then that starts creating you opportunities to think about things like digital products as well. So you can, whereas if you go into an agency as a CEO, I know I'm really giving that concept a real bashing at the moment, and that's just because I've been burnt from it. But if you go into that role as a CEO and you hire people, you do have a responsibility to be looking out for the growth of that company and the people who you've convinced to come and work for you. So you can't really go, right, I'm a CEO of this company, I'm writing a book, I'm doing this course, I'm going to do a retainer as well as doing the CEO stuff. I'm going to work for this company as well, because the people who are investing in you by deciding to work with you, I think, looking at you and going, you're not really that dedicated, are you? And if you are doing that, you're not dedicated, are you? You're not dedicated to your agency. You just, it's a stepstone.
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming, Paul, and I agree with you to some extent. It's just that it's really, if your activities will benefit the business, you see the business actually as an individual almost. As long as your activities, you can say to yourself, I have a short, medium, long-term strategy, and what I'm doing is benefiting the business, short, medium, and long-term. It's okay. If you can't really say that in your heart, that what your activities as the front person of that business is helping that business short, medium, long, you do have a problem. Over to you, Stephen.
Yeah, there's something that's just, I don't know, I think can bring a lot of peace or calm to one's life when you realize that you don't have to do something, right? Like just because, like we've been saying this whole time, it's like just because the world's telling you, oh, go bigger, go build your agency, like it's like there's something pushing everyone in that direction. You don't have to do that. Like if you're happier being a freelancer, like why do something that is going to cause more stress or be harder or not work out if you like doing what you're doing. I think something that's always fascinating to me is how one's perspective changes and shifts over time. And you mentioned that that book that you had read, you had a different perspective earlier. Like how has your perspective changed from when you read it, 2 years ago to like now?
So when I read it a couple of years ago, when I was starting the most recent agency, I was convinced that I needed to do this agency thing. And obviously there's, like we say, all the messaging that you hear. There isn't many courses to say, hey, here's the course on how to not start an agency and how to not scale your agency. There's no point buying that course, and there's no point someone making it. It doesn't sell very well. But when I read it two or 3 years ago, I read it as an instruction manual on how most people get it wrong. And I saw that as like aha. So what I need to do is I need to start this, and I need to get myself a manager as soon as possible. And then I can release myself into being the creative side of things again. And so whereas now, having been through that process, I realized that the way I've interpreted the book this time is don't start an agency.
Fair enough.
So it's kind of like, yeah, which is the interesting thing. It's like the way I've interpreted the book, it's funny just reading it again and seeing that it's also saying the reason, I mean, basically the book is about why 80 or 90% of businesses fail. That's actually what the book is all about. And it's also partly about why McDonald's as a company succeeds from a franchise point of view. Because people who buy a franchise in McDonald's can be entrepreneurs, but the management is taking care of them for them. At least the sales, the marketing, all that stuff is taken care for them, so they can be the manager and the entrepreneur without the strategy side of things. They can just look after the localized thing. But yeah, like I say, the book this time, I read it and I was listening to the advice in there, and I thought, yep, you could do that. That could work. You could hire the missing parts of the triangle. Or you could read another book from someone like Paul Jarvis called The Company of One, if you've ever heard of that book at all. That's an awesome book. I love Paul Jarvis's perspective on things. And then you've got other voices in the community. Lee Jackson, who I know has been on WP-Tonic quite a few times. He has this thing called
I think he's given up. I think he's given up on me, Paul.
Has he? So he's one of his, he has this thing called Agency Transformation, which is an event that he runs. And you would assume that event is all around growth, but it's not. Lee's angle is all about well-being. So, because he was severely burned in his kind of first major attempt at a web agency. He got himself into a lot of trouble, a lot of stress, a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety, and it still carries on with Lee now. He's still got bad memories of that stuff that haunt him and come back and hold him back from different situations. So his whole community is all about good well-being. So if you are going to run an agency, these things about making sure you do it in a way that isn't what all the messages say, but just the way that you feel comfortable, balance. That's what he's about. So yeah, it's interesting. You can just read into these different messages in a totally different way. Yeah.
What I guess like what I would love to know, and maybe this is like too personal. If you don't want to go, that's totally fine.
That's
but
okay.
like, why didn't that work? Because in my head, that's exactly like where I would take that book. Like, okay, hire the manager, hire the people, the right people, and then you can make it work. But like, why? Like, what happened to make you realize that doesn't work, or it doesn't work for you at least?
So my plan was to raise enough money to hire a manager, and it took 2 years to get to that point where we could afford that. So it was a case of, okay, let's I'll do everything more or less, with a team of what you call kind of technicians as such. So the people in my team, first my business partner, Peter, who is also a designer, and then Adrian, who we brought in as a developer. So I hired, me and Peter kind of hired version of ourselves in a way. But in hindsight, I think that it would be a really good idea if someone starts something like this and they're a creative, to get that management position that project management position that gets rid of all the daily junk, all of the, because you're the CEO, you're the team maker, you're the personal accounts person, you're the shoulder to cry on when people in the company are having a bad time or something like that. You're all those different things. So the sooner you can take away those things and be happy with the role that you're going to take, the better. Because and this is something that what I understand, there's a bit of a, let's say, the British mentality versus the American mentality, right? Car sales, right? In British company promotes their best salesperson to the manager. And I could be wrong, this is totally generalizing. The American car sales company just pays the best car salesperson double and gives them fat bonus.
For sure.
Right? The British company, and I'm British, so I've got that, mentality as such, I guess. I just lost my best developer and designer by promoting myself to the CEO. Whereas I would be much better to put in place someone at the beginning, somehow get some money for that, whether that's investment or partner with someone, and make sure that I'm doing the good thing that I was doing, being the person, doing the branding for the company, doing the designing, doing some of the development, being a happy chappy inside my own company kind of thing. So I think that is the way to do it. And I think the trouble with that is the planets have to align in a really perfect way to get that right. And I think that's why so many companies struggle, because they start 10 paces back from where they need to be. Yeah. And then they're racing forward to try and get there. But, if you sprint the first 100 meters of a 3,000 meter race, you'll be winning for the first few seconds. But that's about it, unless something happens to the rest of the people in the race. And,
Yeah, I think that was great words. We're going to finish off the podcast part of the show. Hopefully, Paul's going to stay on for another 10, 15 minutes, which we call bonus content, which you'll be able to see on the WP-Tonic YouTube channel and on the WP website with the whole interview plus the bonus content. So, Paul, what's the best way for people to find out more about you and get hold of you?
Twitter is probably the best way to connect at the moment. I mean, quite honestly, the thing I'm most interested in these days is just meeting other people in this WordPress community. So connect on Twitter, WP_Paul Lacey, and let's just connect.
Oh, and also plug your podcast. Also,
you can find me. Yeah, every Monday at 2 p.m. UK time. We have the This Week in WordPress podcast, which is a panel news show, which is similar to your own show that you do on WP-Tonic. So it's just talking all about that crazy world we live in at the moment called the WordPress economy, whatever we call it.
Well, we did. I did diverge. My panel's very patient because we diverge all over the place, actually, Paul.
No, it's brilliant. It's so much to talk about at the moment in WordPress. It's brilliant.
There is. Stephen, what's the best way for people to get hold of you?
Yeah, head over to zipfish.io, run a speed test, and see how much faster you can make your website.
And before we wrap up the show, we're doing, me and Spencer Forum, who's a regular on the WP-Tonic Roundtable show, are doing a free webinar on Friday, the 12th of March. And it's all going to be about marketing automation with a real focus on helping the membership entrepreneur. If you're using Lifter LMS, Learn Dash, or any platform, we're going to be showing you how to build modern funnels and how to use marketing automation to keep your students paying their monthly fees or attracting other students to your membership website. How do you join up for this webinar? Basically, go to the WP-Tonic website. In the top navigation, there's a button that says webinar. You click it, you sign up, and you'll be notified when we will be going live. The reason why you should join us live is that you'll be able to ask us directly questions of me and Spencer about this whole fascinating area. So hopefully we'll see you on the 12th of March at 10:30 Pacific Standard Time. We're gonna close the podcast part of the show, but please join us on the WP-Tonic YouTube channel, and you can watch the rest of this interview. We'll see you soon, folks. Bye. So, Paul, as we were saying in the other part of the show, the podcast part of the show, I think there's a number of ways of dealing with these things that we have been discussing, but there is no one way of doing it. That is the and why business is more of an art form than a science, really, because there's no mechanical do this, do that will lead to this result and you'll have a successful business. If that was the case, everybody would have a successful business. The reality is it's an art form, basically. But I think at WP-Tonic, I don't employ anybody directly. I have some people that are on monthly retainers with me. I have some people that I have paid in advance for a certain block of hours. I have other people that are part, as I see, as the WP-Tonic tribe, and if they have a skill that that suits a particular client that I've got, I will offer them the work because I see them as part of my tribe, as the part of the people that I trust. So I have a number of relationships, but I don't employ people directly because I found trying to feed people directly, you've got to be a substantial business to really look after people to the way that I would want to look after them if you were paying them a normal salary. What's your views around this, Paul?
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of pressure on your shoulders as soon as you employ someone, even if it's just one person. If you're the kind of person that cares about other people and relationships, then that can weigh on you quite a lot. When you're, making decisions, especially when you're having, some like the decisions that some of the thoughts that I started having in the last year, when I was really thinking, I just don't know if this is the right thing for me anymore. I would always, another voice would appear in, the other side of my mind saying, well, what about this person and this person? That's really going to screw them. They're not going to be in a good position. And you told them, you might have told them this, or you might have told them that. And I think, again, that's not for everyone to take that kind of weight on your shoulders, and you can quite quickly. And do you know what the crazy thing was that I actually started thinking about closing this down about 2 years ago, but it was a very slow process of one reinforced idea after another and another thought and stuff like that. And I actually was invited to do some speaking at some events about agencies, because when you've been on a few things, and you're a voice from time to time in places, and you're basically louder than the rest of the people who aren't doing it. That's the thing. So those people who are creating events and stuff like that, they will invite you to be a speaker, and with no validation that you actually know how to scale an agency or something like that. For instance, you can be invited to talk about scaling an agency. And I found myself invited to a few of these talks, and I'll mention Lee again, Lee Jackson, because I was invited to speak at his event, Agency Transformation Live, in 2019, and he invited me, and I was like, oh, I really was thinking like yesterday about shutting my agency down, so this isn't ideal, but I really don't want to miss this opportunity. And if I say no to this, then everyone will know that I was a failure because I clearly didn't know what I was doing. So I agreed to it anyway. And then as I was trying to plan a talk, I was trying to figure out what I was going to talk about, and I could not think of anything to speak about that was going to give any kind of good advice to someone how they should grow their agency or anything like that. So in the end, I just decided to do something completely different because I was so afraid of going on the stage in front of so many of my peers who I knew from either online or in real life, and people that I really looked up to. And literally, someone going, "Hey, Paul, you do not know what you're talking about. Get off the stage. What are you doing?" So I did like a personal story.
Get on your bike, boy.
Yeah, I
Get on
did a personal story that was just a personal story about something that happened years and years ago when I had a previous agency that got me through a really, really rough spot. And the whole point of the story was purely about sometimes you need to be reminded that you're really good at something and that someone really values what you do. So I did this talk, just relieved to get through the 30 minutes of it. And basically, there was a standing ovation and people were crying their eyes out in this talk. It was insane. It was just the most bizarre thing. And these were all agency owners. And to me, it kind of said that there is going to be pain. When you start a business and it's not just you will go through some pain. And basically, these people weren't crying for my sad story because my story was quite happy, I thought. They were crying because they'd been through some pain and they were thinking about something that they realized they'd done that was valuable to the world or to their clients or to their family or something like that. I don't know where I'm going with this tangent.
That happens. Don't feel too bad about it, Paul, because that regularly happens to me. Over to Stephen.
No, I think that's a really good point. That there are a lot of agency owners that have been, or like including myself, like in running WordPress stuff, over the course of 10 years, where there's some really high moments, but some really painful moments, and the amount of times that painful moment or high moment that there's almost like a one-to-one relationship with you and other agency owners, like being in that spot. And I think like there's always those moments that you question if you're doing the right thing or if what you're doing matters to anybody. And is it worth the pain that you're putting yourself through, or your significant other, or your family? And there's tons of those moments. And so when somebody's like yourself, like is just willing to be open and honest, like about this last agency and kind of how you tried to do it and how like it didn't work out, like it brings up like all these emotions like inside of me. That's just like, oh man, like I know how that feels. Like that can resonate.
That's my commitment now. So I learned on that day on that stage when people were crying their eyes out, and I realized how valuable being completely as honest as one can be to people who are your peers and your community and stuff like that. All this, showing off and, how many figures is your company making? All this stuff, it does serious damage to people's well-being mentally. And so I realized that day that not only that, it was extremely therapeutic to me to go on stage and think and tell a story that was actually turns out to be quite personal, and get it out there. And it was a story from 10 years ago. What I've tried to do since, when I've had the opportunity to talk about anything to do with mental health and those kind of struggles around, work and agencies and stuff like that, I've tried to look at stories that are closer and closer to the present day, because I think it's easier anyway, to talk about something that went completely wrong, that was partly your fault 10 years ago. It's a lot more difficult to face up to something major decision that you might have made yesterday that could have a really, bad effect on your friends, your family, and your own well-being. And I think that I can just say that if you, anyone who can, if you can't, obviously I'm not saying everybody go on stage and tell personal stories, but the speaking of it, whether it's to a therapist or a friend, and the honesty is what will get you through and help you to make the right decisions moving forward. It has for me anyway, and I know it has for a lot of people that I've spoken to. The problem with that talk was I was immediately asked to come back the following year, and I was like, oh, you know, I got through that, and now I've got to think of something else.
Well, you can actually can say no, Paul, politely.
No,
You do
that's the
you
thing.
do realise that
now.
you know, as long as you do it politely, respectfully, most people will understand you have got a lot of commitments. You know,
I was delighted though. No, I was
Yeah.
delighted, but I was another conundrum of what to talk about. So I did do another talk the following year, and it was called Scale. Right, but it had a question mark at the end of it. And I just read Paul Jarvis's book called The Company of One, and I was really, and it's quite funny because if you look at the speaking gigs that I've done over the last, say, 4 years, they start with kind of WordPress things, then they start about building an agency, then they go to mental health, then they go to downscaling, and then they go to like today, where I'm literally like, my company went wrong.
this
last month.
Let's move the conversation on
Back to WordPress. Back to WordPress.
no, let's move it on to mental health. I think one of the key things is to have that helps is to have a mentor, have somebody that's good. They don't have to have precisely experience in your precise industry. What you do need is maybe somebody that's got a lot of business experience, that's gone through the ups and downs of business, to be able to speak honest. I'm a member of a business organization in Northern Nevada called the Business Assembly, the Entrepreneur Assembly, but I think they've just recently changed their name, and we can meet up once a month. And I know some of the key advisors in that organization. Unfortunately, because of the virus, we're not being able to meet monthly for almost a year now. But I've been a member of that for about 3 years, and they keep asking me to be a mentor, and I just don't feel I'm successful enough to be a mentor. But I go along as somebody to be mentored. And it's really interesting to listen to the other people that come for advice, because fundamentally it's always the same problems, it's always the same questions, it's always the same personal doubts that come up during these discussions. So how important do you think mentorship is, Paul?
Sorry, one of my lights has just gone off, but just to say, this is the second time I think that we've spoken in person, as in virtual person, because we spoke after after a kind of what would you kind of call it, mastermind session that I was covering for someone else, and you were there, and I was just helping someone out by covering for them. And
I think that was one of Lee's shows, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. It was one of his things, yeah. And you and I had a chat at the end of it, and I don't remember what we talked about, but you gave me some advice about something, and I remember coming off that call and remembering you in particular and thinking, I'm so glad that we met, and the advice that you gave was really good and really comforting, and I took that along and did something with it. So just on your personal assessment of yourself that you couldn't be a mentor, I would disagree with that, just because you haven't done some of the exact things that some of the people in this business network might have done. I think that the fact that you, because just think how many people you've interviewed and how many different types of people you've interviewed. You understand.
Well, I turn up in my 2018 Impasa, and the rest of these mentors turn up in their 150,000 Teslas. So it's the car park is filled with a brand new Teslas.
Yeah, and those people are stuck. They've bought this stuff. They bought a huge house and they've bought a Tesla. And what if they want to turn around? Their families have got expectations. They've got bills to pay. They've got mortgages coming out of their ears. Who says that that's the right way to do it? Yeah, I think there was a study recently by one of the universities that talked about income and happiness as well. I heard this on a podcast recently. Yeah. And apparently it's something like in America, I know it's different income in different places in America and everything, but let's say I think they calculated the average of around $75,000 a year income, whether that's employed or self-employed or whatever, and that there is no happiness specifically from more money and stuff that comes after you're earning $75,000 a year. You might solve some problems with the more money and the more things that you can buy and the Teslas and everything, but it doesn't mean that you're going to be more happy. You just might be creating more problems to cause for yourself. And I think that's why you see so many.
I totally agree with you, but unfortunately, every country has its strengths and weaknesses, and sometimes it has more strengths than weaknesses, or the other way around. But a lot of Americans, they do love their bling. They do.
I would like a Tesla.
They do love their and the bigger the house, the more bling they can display. Not all Americans, but a lot of them, they do love their bling. Where, if a Mini was more reliable, I'll probably buy a Mini, and I'll just buy like a 2-bedroom cottage, and I'll be totally happy. I like small things actually, So, but Americans do tend to like the bigger, the better. They, the bigger the car, the bigger the food, the more bling. Bless their little hearts. I'm sorry, Stephen, but but so would you agree that mentorship? So you seem to be thinking that mentorship, because I think one of the benefits I get going to this group is that they're not in my target audience, most of these people. So I can be as honest as I like to this group.
You're not there to try and get sales, are you?
I'm not. I'm not there.
Reason.
The WP-Tonic. I think what you see on the show is what you get when you meet me. Some people, when you meet them, they're totally different to their online persona. I would hope that most people would say. They normally say I'm more friendly, more friendlier when they meet me than on the show. I don't know how to take that, but they normally say that, so I take it as it comes. But what I'm saying is, it's still show business when you're doing a podcast or you're doing a blog post or you're speaking at a WordCamp. It's show business. You are promoting yourself. Where with this group, I think it's very important to have either personal, organisational, some setting where you don't have to put this persona on. What do you think, Paul?
I think there's a chap in the WordPress community who used to be the founder of iThemes, Corey Miller, and he's talked about this quite a lot. In fact, he was one of my main inspirations for deciding to do a really personal talk that I'd mentioned earlier, because I saw an old recording on WordPress.tv of his talk where he talked about his behind the scenes mental health problems while he was building out iThemes, which is one of the biggest WordPress brands that has ever been. And I also listened to a podcast. It was the Studio Press podcast, and Brian Gardner was interviewing Corey. And Brian Gardner was the founder of Genesis, and he was basically crying, apologizing to Corey for them going from friends to almost competitors, but not in a good way. And he was kind of saying he just wishes that he could turn back time and just have a relationship with the people who he felt were now his competition and have those people as a support network instead. And I think that is really important to have a support network. But I really think you said about mentors, if you can have a really trusted single mentor that you really resonate with and you really think offers good advice, then that's brilliant. I mean, I've had one that put me on the process of thinking about what I was doing, shutting this company down. And it's a guy called Jim Galliano who has a podcast. He has the Jim Galliano podcast.
Yeah, I know.
He's amazing guy. And he's been there and done that. And he talks all about the personal brand and the small the small is better, and the different ways of making money and those kind of things. And he's aware of where the economy is going. He can see the bigger you are, unless you're supported by the government or big tech or whatever, you're getting crunched and crunched and crunched, and it's a pressure cooker all the time. So to be small and agile and to develop a personal brand is a great idea. And if you can have a mentor that aligns with the way you think, but is also looking out for your faults in your outside influences or the things that you haven't yet experienced in your life, then I think that's where a mentor is really useful. And I think a lot of those people who drive the Teslas, if they're just hanging out with other people who are driving Teslas at the golf club, they're not going to be getting some of the advice that they sometimes need, which is a different perspective.
Yeah, I understand.
It might not change their mind. It might reinforce that they're doing the right thing. But marriages can be saved, families can be saved by the right advice at the right moment. And that's been my experience, because I was nearly in a divorce. I wouldn't say it got that far, but I had a bag packed back in October. I got 2 kids, one's 13, one's 6. Been married for like 15 years or something. And the stress of the agency was so much. It was just, I just wasn't the normal person that they knew years before. And it got to the point where I'd booked a hotel room with my dog, which is, my dog's over there, doesn't leave the room that I'm in. I booked a pet-friendly hotel room.
Don't worry, your dog will always love you, Paul.
The dog will always love me. Yeah, the dog will. I'm not a religious guy, right? But I hope that if there is a heaven, the dog is there for me when I arrive. If the dog's there, I'm like, this place is awesome. But yeah, and my daughter talked me and my wife out of this crisis moment with some kind of metaphor, with some, I don't know. It's difficult to explain. Yeah, sure. It wasn't a normal conversation, but it took a 13-year-old to really make me understand that I've really got to start looking out for the more important things in life. So a mentor helped me, because a mentor had told me what I needed to do, but I didn't quite listen enough to actually do it. So when my 13-year-old daughter, then I knew what to do, and I was able to act quickly and correct things quite quickly.
So what's your experience, Stephen? Do you have you always found mentorship or having somebody outside your normal realm of people that you normally speak to helpful?
Yeah, I feel like I've had a interesting journey with mentorship. I feel like most times, or every time that I've had a actual real mentor or been a mentor of somebody, it hasn't worked out too well. No. But I've also found that instead of labeling it as mentorship, which is maybe just it's more like if there's somebody somebody that is more experienced, maybe not necessarily older, just more experienced in whatever it is that I'm going through or trying to figure out. And they come alongside me and treat me as a peer. Not that I know these things, but hey, let's just be friends and let's do life together. And then vice versa, when I've, seen some people that are hey, I can lend some wisdom here. But instead of saying hey, let me tell you how to do this, or tell me your problems and I'll fix them. It's just no, let's walk through life together. Let's be friends. And I'm going to be vulnerable with you and you're being vulnerable with me. And it's more of this peer relationship that I think where that idea of mentorship really can become something extremely beautiful, because both people view themselves as equals, versus I think in more of the classic mentorship thing, you have the master and the student versus somebody who maybe is the master, but they don't see themselves as that, and they don't necessarily want to be that in your life. They just want to be the friend that's going to help out if you need any help and tell you the things that you need to hear, regardless how hard it is.
It's a great point. Honestly, I just want to say something on that, because during the time where I was really struggling mentally with anxiety and stress, I pretty much cut out relationships with friends. And I think that while I was able to sometimes go on stage and secretly talk about things that were going on in a kind of metaphorical sense, I didn't want to have conversations with people who would ask me questions that I wasn't ready to answer. Just like, so what's going on? You know, are you happy in what you're doing? Because I didn't want to lie. I didn't want to lie, so it was just easier to avoid those conversations. And you know, that's the dangerous thing. I think that if you can, like you said, whether it's a mentor or a peer or just a really good friend who looks out for you, and there's plenty of people in WordPress that you can meet and are vulnerable and are ready to be open with what they're struggling with, and it doesn't have to be a kind of, you know, here's my sad story, there's and then listen to your sad story. It's just kind of like honesty, you know, trying to remove the ego side of things. And we've all got an ego. I have an ego problem from time to time, and but when you can let your guard down with someone that you trust, that, like you said, is a beautiful thing, and can save lives, really. I mean, there's tough times right now. People can be extremely depressed, extremely anxious about situations, combined with maybe their default setting, which might not be particularly great for starters, you know. So you combine the current pandemic, the economic issues, with somebody who's had, you know, some trouble in their past, and they could be in really serious trouble. But if you can have those conversations, that's constantly stepping in the right direction, whether it's business troubles or personal troubles, health troubles, whatever it is. You need to have people that you can trust around you, I think.
I think we're going to wrap up the interview. Paul, it's been a blast. I think we've covered a lot of territory. Hopefully the listeners and viewers will get great value from the conversation. They should do, I feel. You have to come back at some time when we have another discussion, Paul. So we're going to wrap it up now, folks. We'll see you next week where we have another great guest and another great interview. We'll see you soon, folks. Bye.
Thanks, guys.